And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'm delighted to welcome back my friend and yours, Tony DeAngelo. So Tony, welcome back to the
pleasure.
Program. And for those of you who may not know, Tony's a weekly regular on the Lee Elsie radio program on Tuesday mornings, 7 o'clock. And I always feel honored that he will...
I'm honored you have me.
To come down and spend an hour here on City Focus and discuss the issues of the day and wherever our conversation may lead us. And note that we welcome phone calls, and if you folks would like to contribute to the program or have anything that you'd like to offer one way or the other, good, bad, or indifferent, we're interested. So I wanted to start this evening. I know you normally hone in on state stuff when you're on Lee. But with what's been going on out of Washington, as
oh my Lord!
I will say the Washington satellites being the areas where President Trump is being dragged into court, kind of like Washington satellites. What's your kind of take? I mean, if you listen to the Fox network, which I do watch more often than not. They will argue that the former president's being dragged through the mud, and it's an uneven justice system that we're devolving into.
My take, it's one of those questions you have to pray to answer. Politically, we're in a horrible place in this country because we've actually, well, let's begin at the beginning. Did Donald Trump do everything perfectly? I don't even have to answer that. Are there times you look at Donald Trump and you say, what'd you do that for? You idiot, what's wrong with you? There's times you do that. But yet, when the man offers his opinion on things, it's starting to become criminalized. Now, is everything necessarily his opinion? No, but so much of it is. I think the fundamental issue is we're getting to a place in this country where my right to speak and your right to speak, which may differ from the guy down the street, it is being criminalized because it's different, and we have to shut you down. You cannot speak. We have seen in this very state, Marty Olsen, we have seen, excuse me, our state legislature, Democrats and Republicans propose bills, limit in some ways free speech. How can you do that? This seems to be a disturbing trend. Excuse me. So when it comes to what makes the satellites, I don't think these are solid indictments, but yet it's this thing of you've got to get my way and forget about your own. I think that's a terrible place to be.
And who's the arbiter of quote unquote free speech from the First Amendment? Is it just the majority party? And
it's turning into that, and that's a very dangerous place.
That is a dangerous place, and it's especially dangerous if it becomes a one-party state.
Well, that's just it, because what does it take to revoke the First Amendment? Well, 2 houses of Congress, a compliant president, and a 15-member Supreme Court. We have turned into a dictatorship. And how do you get away from that if that happens? That's highly troubling.
Well, as we were discussing before coming on the air, I mean, we are, there's a movement of which, of globalists, and I will call them what I
Exactly
will call
what they
them,
are.
Liberal pinheads who are elitists that think that they know better. And as opposed to trying to raise everybody to the standards that have been set by the United States, they were trying to destroy the United States so that we settle down into mediocrity, which is contrary to everything that this country was founded on. And what's mind-boggling is how fast this has been going on, as well as how passive people have been about it.
It's done without any kind of logic or reason or any sort of semblance of anything. When this happens, it becomes a crusade. It becomes this, everything, all the terms will start flying. And when you try to reason it through with people, they don't want to hear it. They just start yelling. And it's like, I'm not saying I'm right, but if I do believe I'm right, I want to give you my opinion as to why I believe I'm right. Now you tell me where I'm missing it, because I'm not concerned about being right. I'm concerned about having the right answer.
Well, I would concur, but I think that all ideas should be allowed to be discussed and debated, and let them rise or fall on their own
Let
merits.
them proceed on their own merits.
And that's not happening.
Not at all. Not at all. And when it comes to the welfare of the country, and when it comes to the fact of, did Donald Trump actually create a crime or commit a crime? In my opinion, he committed a number of infractions, but certainly not worthy of what he's going through.
Well, you could argue that anybody who has held that office
Forever and ever and ever
has committed infractions, to use your term. I mean, and trying to shut the things down goes back to the Adams administration and President number 2 with the Alien and Sedition Act.
Well, that's right.
And that didn't go over well, and it didn't last because it was so bad. Because if the Adams administration didn't like criticism, and they tried to shut it down, and Jefferson et al. Balked at that.
So I think we're in a very dangerous place where people, when we start and we go from the rule of law to the law of rule, I get very concerned for this country. I really do.
But we're also seeing a shift, which was expedited by COVID, but it seemed to have grabbed a toehold, maybe stronger, a claw hold, regarding executive actions and just bypassing the legislative part of the government.
Well, and a large part of that, I believe, is no one ever really, at least in the beginning, imagined the evil, a ruler could do. I mean, when our illustrious Governor Ned Lamont, the unaccountable and in many ways unforgivable, certainly hypocritical, went before our legislature and said, I need these powers. I need to have these powers because we can't move that quickly. We're facing a tsunami. We'll give you the powers, because I think that was a mistake as far as that, because look at what that did for so many years. But the other thing is, we took a statute that is, what do we do if we're being in a nuclear attack, and we used it for a public health measure? I mean, someone, and I remember talking about this, and I used to talk about this with Lee a lot, somebody should sit there and say, no, we don't need to do this, because we're getting into a place where we're really having one-man rule. And this is, and it's curious the way this power, to your point, this executive power gets used. because it's like, well, I need to be very stringent here when it comes to COVID-19, and everybody needs to mask, and if you don't take a vaccine, you lose your job, and. But when it comes to something like, our legislators driving drunk and causing harm or something like that, which to me is an emergency. Anybody wielding a weapon and not knowing where they're going. Our king didn't touch that. So it becomes a selective exit. And people would say, well, it's not an emergency. Well, what do you mean it's not an emergency? Define emergency. He gets to define the emergency. That's the critical issue. Yeah. And he'll define the ones he wants and not define the other ones that he doesn't want.
Well, with COVID here in Connecticut, our assembly, they gave
it to him.
Gave it to him. And repeated 2 or 3 times. It's repugnant to my senses.
Yes.
That they would just abrogate their duties.
And marvel not, my friend. We haven't really started this yet, and I'm not ready to throw this game in the bullpen. But we're not done with these, whatever you want to call them, FOCUS emergencies. The one we're going to start looking at very shortly, climate change. Oh, the ozone layer is up. Oh, the pollution is up. Oh, did you see the haze around New Haven? We have to tell everybody to stay home. You can't be on the highways unless you have an emergency pass. And this is going to be the next one. And there's major money right now from the McKinseys of the world and the Boston Consultings and the Biden administration. This is where they're headed because this is the next way of population control.
Well, an email that I received just before heading over to meet with you. Did you know that Governor Lamont and his administration have proposed a new regulation to ban the sale of gas-powered cars by 2035 and take away our choice to purchase the kind of car that we drive? Who the hell gave him that authority?
People way above him. That's basically an agenda. Because think of Dr. Kissinger. We talked about this, Henry Kissinger. He who controls oil controls the world, right? So if these people who want to do away with fossil fuel, my right to get in a car in Pomfret, Connecticut, drive down here and meet you in New London, Connecticut, and head over here to Waterford. Now, if I have to depend on a grid to do that, not only does that person in the grid get to control me, maybe they don't want me coming to see you, and they can flick the car off. Or maybe they didn't like what I said on the radio, and they can shut down my phone. This is basically what they want to do. Lamont here is not a cause, he's a symptom of a much greater thing. Just about all the governors of the blue states are involved with this. And it's basically, they will justify this by climate change, and we need hydropower. And the world is going to be, 5 years ago we were all supposed to, die of pollution. I guess we must have missed the opportunity to do that. I can go on for days about it. You will cause more pollution in electric fuel and producing that than you will in clean burning nat gas. Of course, when you have clean burning, when you have low cost energy, individual people can prosper without the effects of government. That's the key here to this thing, my friend.
But the thing that amazes me, again, how passive we are here in the United States, where we have been working for decades in terms of making our energy more efficient and cleaner, and other large producers such as China, India.
They don't care.
They don't care, and they'll give lip service at these global meetings and do nothing. And who suffers? We do.
Well,
and the consumers of the United States and our businesses. It's amazing to me, and people buy this stuff. And a lot of the big push from where I sit anyway, goes back to the Obama administration. When he was elected initially, he said he wanted to transform America, and we're moving in that area that he wanted to go.
Oh, without a doubt.
You know,
Well, and then you have to ask yourself, why does he live so close to the White House? Why is there so much activity at his residence? Why are these people who are the same players that he had, who are still involved in this? They're essentially being puppet masters to the charade of the current POTUS. They're running the government. They're it.
and to the detriment of the United States.
Oh, total.
I recall Obama being asked early in his first term if he believed in American exceptionalism, and he had a rather snarky response, and I'll just paraphrase that he believed in it as much as the people who live in Somalia or Chad believe in exceptionalism in their countries. I was just flabbergasted with that response. I mean, without American exceptionalism, we could have been speaking German or Japanese or some hybrid of that.
Without a doubt.
As we're sitting here today.
Without a doubt. And I am of the belief that an economy will do much better with $1.50 gasoline as opposed to $4 gasoline. And with with a stronger dollar as opposed to a weaker dollar, but they don't like that because that pulls people away from the, shall we say, imprimatur, if I could use a SAT word, of government, which they don't like.
But one thing I've noticed, and I don't hear anybody talking about it, but when you look at car advertisements on television, they are now all electric cars.
Absolutely right.
There's no gas-powered or diesel-powered motor vehicles being advertised at all. Although if you drive by the lots, they're still loaded with petroleum-fueled automobiles.
And the electric cars there's range problems. They're uninspiring. They don't look great. They're not they're not the kind of cars where a kid would walk in a classroom and would hide a motor trend in his history book. They don't provoke that kind of, zeal. I mean, my car is 15 years old, and I say to my wife, Kathy, every single day, I'm not excited with anything that they're selling that would be the least bit practical that I could use.
And they're expensive.
And they're ungodly.
But, I don't see where this transformation is being proposed or being discussed with buses, tractor trailers. How about rail? I mean, freight trains. Are freight trains with electric, or are they still?
I think you still have a bunch of diesels. For freight, you do.
I mean, I know that here in the Northeast Corridor with the rapid, with passenger rail, it's electric. But when you look at some of the long trains out in the West and Midwest that are, as long as the state of Connecticut,
yeah.
I can't imagine they got an electric engine pulling them along.
I've never seen it, put it that way.
And then you've got, even with electric and mentioning rail, you've got Shoreline East as well as Metro North, where they have purchased a boatload of new trains. And ridership is down. And they're cutting back on service.
And this is what I can't figure. The tradition, for one who rode trains for many years, the basis or the purpose of a train is to move large amounts of people into cities. And the cities would be very active places. Now the cities are devolving, becoming more deserted. There's a lot more work at home. And why do you need more trains as opposed to reduce trains running at higher speeds and make fewer trains, fewer stops?
Well, there seems to be the elitists know better, where they are going to foist rail service on us whether the public wants it or not, because it's good for you.
Well, the laugh again, one who rode trains for many years. When Lamont was saying that I want to shave 5 minutes off the trip or some ridiculously low amount from New Haven to New York, what people don't realize is that Connecticut does not own the track and does not own the station, so that if a New Haven train and a New York train pull up, the New York train gets to go first. And that could be 7 minutes off that trip, while the whole big long New Haven, and it's like, what are you doing other than taking our money, Ned, and throwing it into the street? Literally.
So, I mean, it's we do have this elitist attitude that emanates at many different levels. I mean, we're at the global level, here nationally, as well as here at the state level as well. And the lack of competitive, at least here in America, when you've got lack of competitive elections and balance in government, this also fuels this level of disdain for the electorate. It's amazing to me. I wanted to also just discuss, we touched on this the last time you were in, regarding state pier and the exorbitant cost overruns.
Isn't that amazing?
And how the Danish firm, here we have a foreign firm who's got control of state pier in Connecticut for 20 years. And they have committed $90 million and any other expenses above that, which have now reached around close to $300
With no
million,
end in sight.
at the nickel of the Connecticut taxpayers. It's an amazing to me, and there's a piece that's in the paper today, extolling the virtues here. We have a massive ship delivering key wind turbine components to New London. And in the body of this article, I mean, they're bragging about how large these structures are going to be to make these wind turbines move. I mean, they're
massive.
I mean, huge. I mean, it's tall, 5 times taller than the Gold Star Bridge, which goes to Groton. Now, think how tall that is. And 5 times taller. I mean, this is it's going to look like it's reaching to the moon. And it blows my mind. And what's it going to take, and what kind of environmental destruction is it going to take preparing the footings to support this thing, as well as what are the blades going to be doing when they're functioning. I mean, it's just not well thought out, and the benefit is negligible.
Well, I think there's a large political agenda tied to it, because when you're heavily into the wind power thing, I mean, take Greenpeace. It used to be Save the Whales.
Yes.
Now it's like Kill the Whales. And you kind of sit there and say, what happened? Well, the cool thing now is we've got to, even though I was for saving the whales, we've got to have this cool power. And I think it's becoming an issue with the blue state governors, is who's more environmentally cool. And what are we showing? Who can build the bigger tower? Who can build the more wind-generated item? And that's going to determine, I think, as far as the physiology of the Democratic Party, that's going to determine who gets to the top of it. Who's the most environmentally cool, and who's doing the most? So
Yeah.
a lot of that, I think, is just politically driven. And I'm with you. I mean, I think the benefits of it are pretty darn negligible.
You know, I mean, we ought to be revisiting nuclear,
Yeah.
which gives you much more bang for the buck. They're safer now than they were when they were introduced, and clean. It's just, it makes sense, and they generate significantly more power.
Yeah, it's just not the. it's not the environmentally cool thing.
I heard on the news that these windmills that supposedly want to put up is going to power 70,000 homes in New York. Now, would you know how many windmills that would take?
I'm not an engineer. I wish I could help you. I mean, wind power is a real thing. Ask anybody with a clothesline. But I think it's difficult, at least for me, and I don't speak from the perspective of an engineer, but occasionally, very occasionally, these days less than occasionally, I would go to the desert in California, scheduled to go back if I can put enough nickels together. And you will see windmill after windmill after windmill, and very few of them are turning. They're only going to be turning to the extent that there's wind.
Yeah.
And I have always understood the fact that I've never thought that windmills were going to be, shall we say, high up on the performance scale. I don't know if the input equals the outflow. That's just my my understanding.
Yeah. Okay. We don't get many details either. So, well, plus I just tuned in, so I didn't get what you're saying before. But the other thing is, how much does a windmill cost to put up? And,
Well, Marty and I were just chatting with that before he stepped out, and I think the cost, the concern, as I understand it now, I'm not from this city. I mean, I follow along and the reading and what I may hear on Lee Elsey's show, but from what I understand about the New London Pier, there is a large outflow which really hasn't stopped, at all, and that's nothing's really been. I mean, it would concern the heck out of me because believe me, I may not be the smartest guy in the world, but no, shall we say, no source of funding is infinite. We're chatting with the gentleman about.
Yeah, right now, I guess it's went up to 300 million. It's the spending at the pier. And as far as the windmills go, as far as I can find out, they're at least $3 million each. and that's for 2.2 megawatts at maximum. And also it takes 30 to 55 mile an hour wind, to be able to charge at maximum. But then they don't say anything about how fat that supply cable is going to be, and how much material that's going to take. There's an awful lot of things there that they're not telling us at all, but we're expected to pay that gigantic bill. I don't care what they say that the two companies, are paying for it. We're going to have to pay for it in the end. And there, as I can remember, the nuke plants, it cost about 2 cents. I think, what did they say? Not a megawatt. I can't think of the smaller amount of electricity they use. But then I tried to ask Google, what does a windmill make? The price they told me over Google was so astronomically high, I couldn't really believe it.
I can only judge that by what I'm seeing and what I'm reading, and I hear more disaster stories with e-powered things than I hear success stories. Like, for example, I was watching, did you see the guy, I'm addressing Marty, did you see the guy this week who bought the $150,000 Ford electric truck, and he had to ditch it halfway across the country because he couldn't service it, he couldn't charge it, He had a dent in the fender, and it took 6 months to fix, and they wouldn't say why or whatever the case may be. And he's an Indian guy from Canada, a man from India, I should say. And he said, you know, I was this big as green. I said, this is a farce. This is a joke. He said, I just want to turn the key and go, and he can't do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then you know, since you brought up to traveling, just think of this: they're trying to tell us that electric car is going to be so much cheaper to use. Well, wait a minute. Where are they going to get the highway money? You know, right now they have what I think 70 cents a gallon is all tax. You know,
Oh, you're
and state
absolutely
tax.
right. You're absolutely right.
And so that means then they're going to have to put in tolls. So I was saying before that you want to take your kids down to Disney. Dad said, "Hey, I got 2 weeks. Let's go to Disney." And you start going, and the kids say, "Hey, Dad, it's cold back here. Turn the heat on." Well, if I do that, son, we can only go 150 miles instead of 400.
It's the infrastructure is so badly thought out.
Yeah. Oh, I better give you the show back because I could go on and on. No, I just want to let you know I always try to listen to you, you know, in the morning when you're on the LC.
Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you. You know, you never know who's listening. And believe me, some mornings I'll know who's listening, depending on who may love me or hate me. But I'm so believe me, that touches my heart. Thank you for listening.
Okay, Marty knows who it is.
Okay, yes it is. And thank you very much for calling, and I appreciate your
very
thoughts
much
and
so.
your
Thank
insight.
you.
Okay.
Good night, Larry.
Bye.
Good night.
Yeah. Bye.
Well, there's a gentleman who's a long-time New Londoner, and he's got his finger on the pulse of a lot of different things.
He really does. He
So-
really does.
And we need these kind of folks that stay active and hold their local government officials' feet to the fire.
Boy, we're talking about that. Imagine in a state like Connecticut. I've got this Rod Serling nights. God forgive me, but too much Twilight Zone as a kid. But if you had 3,000 people in this state, in a state of 3,500 people,
3 million people.
3 million, right? Because our population's not increasing, and who could encourage others just to pay better attention, to tell them what they're not seeing on the news, to make it, to provide information and encouragement, to get involved. Marty, we would immediately, I think within 6 months if that happened, we'd go from a, whatever you want to call it, a 53, 42, and the rest don't care kind of state, to a 50-50. Once people realize, I do believe in this axiom. I had a client years ago who was a reformed hippie. He was like 3 shades to the right of Attila the Hun. And I asked him one day, and I said, Mark, what changed you from being this great hippie crusaders? It's very simple. Conservatives are made out of liberals that have been mugged. And once they realize they've been mugged, oh boy, they're going to come back and say, you know, but it doesn't take much, but the compositions of these red states are not that far different from us. We probably have more disenfranchised because of our party system. But the numbers aren't that far off.
Well, I would love to see the Constitution states start moving more to the center, because when you've got an unbalanced government, as Connecticut does in the urban areas, New London, where I live, and it is fraught with lack of debate, discussion, and kind of somebody up here knows all.
And they're not telling, and they're not sharing, and they're not disclosing.
And from at least, I believe the media is complicit. I mean, they go
Oh,
along.
I'm right with you.
And for many folks, the local, even with newspapers losing readership, I mean, there's still a primary place where many people get their information from, which is one reason why I continue to subscribe to the day paper online, is because what they'll have will be what regarding local and regional issues as well as the state, and this is what the people in our area are. This is what they're getting. They don't get the nuts and bolts, the backstory, you might call it.
No, you have to dig for that, and you have to put pieces together. And some days, in order to build a conclusion as to what's happening, you'll have to search for hours. The government will not provide it. The politicians will run. The people who should be in a situation of providing the information and sharing it, you can't find them. And it's...
we've got two large projects that are, ground has broken in New London. One is the Coast Guard Museum, and the other is a community center down in Fort Trumbull. And it amazes me that they have broken ground because they don't have enough money to finish the job. How dare they? Or are they going to get to some point and just continue to bond or ask for other third-party assistance, whether it be here at the community center, which is a New London-based project, to ask the state, or with the Coast Guard Museum, I mean, asking the state and or the feds to ante up to finish these projects. And the projections for usage for both of them are, they belong down in Disney and Fantasyland.
And to Larry's point, we were talking, how do people feel safe in coming to a city when they turn on the TV and they see what's happening? I'm not saying New London, but any city. It's like, why don't I want to go there?
Well, I think that's is evident in New London, where you've got, roughly half the storefronts downtown are vacant. You might say half are occupied, but a 50% vacancy rate is not healthy.
No, it isn't.
So, I mean, that speaks volumes. And if people are not feeling comfortable, they're not coming
They're not
down.
going to show up.
And I know our mayor, he feels safe, so therefore, by definition, he feels everybody should feel safe because he does. But they don't. And he needs to take the blinders off and kind of get a feel for how the other half lives and speak to that. And our city council is comprised of a large majority of 6 of 7 that are far left progressive liberals that are hostile to the police. So they're not going to do anything to address that problem. Send a social worker down, which I don't think is proven to be all that effective.
Well, no. I mean, you can only judge that pudding by eating it, and it has not worked. I mean,
Yep.
I don't think it was me, or maybe it couldn't have been, but anyway.
In any event, we're having fun here
We're
tonight.
really having a night, aren't we?
It's kind of ebbed and flowed. I also want to thank you for stepping up
Oh,
in
dear, I
a
just
pinch.
feel I could have done a whole lot better. Wow. Apologies, folks. We'll get them next time.
This has been an interesting evening, starting from before we got on the air, right on through. So we're muddling through, and we appreciate your forbearance. But the issues are certainly there, and I think it's the Republican presidential primary debate next week.
I believe it's next week, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of
That'll be
curious to see how
interesting,
that should shake out, and I'm wondering if Trump has he made a decision whether he's going to participate or not yet, or is he just going to make a grand entrance on game
said
day?
that he's going to show up for his arraignment in Georgia the same night as the debate, just to take the attention off of everyone else. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah. Well, it's he's got a lead that is just.
We were talking about that earlier. He relates to the common guy, and when you stop and think about that, I was thinking about this on the way down. 2025 is when the Trump tax cuts, they weren't all cuts, but expire. But one of the things that was there is the 20% deduction, you want to get technical, 199 Cap A section, of your business income. Trump passed a law where you're not paying taxes on 20% of your business income. And the day that seeks into people's minds that my taxes went up because the tax cuts went down, and oh, by the way, we have these morons and who hate small business in the in power, and why didn't the Republicans tell me about this? And I think it's just such a shame that they're not. But the thing is, to do that, I think in some ways would be giving, a lot of ways would be giving praise to Trump, because he was the author of that.
Yeah. Well, he authored a lot of good things. You have to get by his personality and cut through the chafe to see the substance of his accomplishments, which have been significant. And many of the arguments that regarding where the current occupant has basically his agenda has been to undo Trump. But I've got to notice that we are time to tidy up and button down, and we'll have to pick this up on another time, Tony. But I want to thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we owe these folks a return engagement.
For a few moments here, and folks, thank you much. We'll see you again next week on City Focus. Good night.
Good night, folks.